You are listening to the Accents podcast on WUKY. I'm your host, Katerina Stoykova, and I have the pleasure of serving as the director of the Kentucky Book Festival, a program of Kentucky humanities. The next installment of KBF will take place on November 2nd at Joseph Beth Booksellers from 9:30 a.m. to 5 p.m. Today's episode features an author who will participate in the festival. This is poet and nonfiction writer Lisa M. Miller. Hi, Lisa. Welcome to Accents.
Hello, Katerina. I'm so happy to be here.
You have a new book, Woe Awe. And my first question is, what are some of the woes and awes of having a poetry book published?
The woes and ahs of being a published author. Mostly it's a lot of fun. Sometimes I wake up with a vulnerability hangover. You know that. That's the woe part. Most artists go through this kind of vulnerability, early morning or 2 o'clock in the morning realization. Oh my goodness, I have put something of myself out in the world. Now I'm vulnerable in a way that I hadn't been before. Because artists, no matter the genre or the medium, we're all putting our hearts and souls into our work. And so for it to be out there for public consumption is sometimes a little scary. The awe is connecting with people over art, over what's been made, over what they've made, over the excitement of what's possible and what's coming, meeting people where they are. And particularly for me, my mission is about healing my own old stuff and stuff that can come up without predictability, but mostly once I've done the inner work to help others along the way. That's really exciting for me. I just want us all to feel well.
Now I want you to say more about Woe and Awe and how did the book come about? It has a story.
The story has a story. So I signed up for Poetry Boot Camp with you, Katerina, years ago when it was first offered during COVID online. It was every week for 6 months. And I knew I needed the accountability for a new endeavor. If we were going to be meeting regularly, I knew I needed to show up with something to share. And it was a terrific blueprint for me to follow. I met in that first boot camp such a lovely group of writers with every level of experience that it encouraged me, and we became each other's playmates, having play dates once a week with you, mentoring all of us. It was such a good experience that when you offered it a second year, the following January, I signed up again. And I really never thought I would be publishing in this genre of poetry. I've written in other genres. I have a couple of other books published. So I was surprised that I could actually generate enough work to create a manuscript of some sort. And then I was shocked because we'd become friends over the course of that year and a half during those 2 boot camps. I was shocked that you sent me an email to say, I really like the direction of your work and I'd like you to consider coming to be part of the Accents team. My shock was about how that line could be crossed from friendship into a professional relationship, because your friendship to me was more important than getting published, so I just didn't expect it.
One doesn't exclude the other.
Yeah, and just to be careful, I wanted to not ever get my hopes up, and I didn't even know if I wanted to put poetry out in the world, honestly. It was so personal and raw that I just played. I played in the poetry space, not knowing if something would come of it.
We've mentioned the word vulnerability several times today, and that's one of the things that I admire so much about your work. And I've heard people say that there is strength in vulnerability. Do you agree with that?
Oh, yes. And this is what my good friends remind me of when I call them and say, it's a vulnerability hangover morning. They say, you are so good with others who are vulnerable. So the same applies. Your vulnerability applies here too. That it's a part of being alive. It's a part of growing all those edges, expanding. And once you let yourself be seen for who you are, you can also let go of the attachment to what other people think about that.
You can.
It's work. It's a lot of inner work.
Yeah.
But when that comes up, for me, it's an opportunity to go, okay, there's something here. There's something that's keeping me awake at night. It means this is an area of potential growth. I can go there if I want to, if the time is right. For me, in the last 2 years, writing and editing this book has been that moment.
Publishing a poetry book is a sort of a graduation to another level of being. Would you agree?
I'm finding that that's true because I published, it's August, right? Or no, it's September. And I launched this in June. So yes, I'm right in the thick of this discovery.
When I publish a new book, one of my woes is, am I doing enough? Are the right things happening? And then I remember that I think that the right things are happening and always as it should be. What do you think?
Am I doing enough? Am I enough? Is there enough? It always feels to me like it comes from the same root about being enough in this life, these brief lives that we have, even if we're alive for 100 years. It's really a blink of an eye. And so the question about enoughness feels like an important human journey question. And maybe each of us has to answer it case by case or challenge by challenge, celebration by celebration.
And all of the above comes with a publication of a poetry book.
Yeah, and aren't we lucky to have these challenges, to have the bandwidth to even recognize that these are challenges? It's such a luxury to have all the basic needs of life taken care of: security, water, clean food, clean laundry. To have the luxury to sit with these questions is really a sign of thriving.
And art is not a luxury.
And sometimes it feels like a luxury because in our busy lives, it can be such a challenge to just make a little bit of time to sit down and put a couple of sentences on a page or a little paint on a page. And we're lucky to have all our basic needs taken care of, that we can carve out a tiny bit of time here and there when we're ready.
To me, Woe Awe is a spiritual book.
It's a spiritual book because I'm a spiritual person. I have a faith tradition that I grew up in, love. It's a part of my life, a part of my identity, celebration. It's there for me in times of mourning. But for me, religion is not all there is. Spirituality feels to me like the umbrella that every human being exists under. And there are wisdom traditions around the world that I love and study and am mentored in that feel to me like the rest of the missing pieces of this giant puzzle that I understand as my life.
I discovered spirituality in my mid-30s. I don't belong to any tradition, and by the method of not so much of trial and error than to what works for me and what doesn't, I have fashioned something for myself that enables me to keep connected to myself, others, and to higher power.
Yeah, I relate to that so deeply. Maybe spirituality is a way of meaning making. It's ancient masters taught in many traditions around the globe that we are comprised of physical beingness, emotional, mental, and spiritual. And that each day should contain elements that feed all those parts of self. So if we happen to be a culture that's overly thinking and intellectualized, then we're really missing out on so much that also, so many of the ingredients that also should be included in this full recipe for health and well-being. So spirituality to me is at least a quarter of my wellness recipe. And I also found it in my 30s. I'd grown up in my faith tradition, met my husband at summer camp, where we would have worship services outside in the Beit Tfilah. In Hebrew, that means house of prayer. And it was under the trees and sky. And we were sitting out on little wood benches that were weathered and worn, had been there decades and decades. And they're there still. We met in the 80s. And that, for me, as a teenager, was the first time I realized that I was part of a great whole in an important way, and at the same time in an insignificant way. But I didn't have a language for what that was. I just thought it was Judaism. I didn't realize it was the spirituality part of religion that was opening me in ways I hadn't experienced at that point. And of course, all your friends are there, and you're growing as a young human. How could that not be spiritual and encouraged, and you're shown what your strengths are? But it wasn't until my 30s when I was brought to crisis. Family friend had died. I was remembering tough childhood moments that I really started seeking for some kind of way to manage what I was dealing with emotionally. So good therapy, of course, always helps. But the missing piece was what I had experienced at summer camp as a kid. That so opened me and helped me feel the bigness of life, that then gave me a language and a vocabulary, especially specific vocabulary for dealing with what I was trying to manage.
And speaking of vocabulary and language, I would love to hear a few poems.
I have to begin with this because it's such a sincere gratitude to the people who held my potential when I was a teenager, struggling, knowing that I would be okay. So this is called The Grace of Elders, and it's dedicated to Ella, Joy, Solel Congregation, and Goldman Union Camp Institute. Someone must have walked in pilgrimage up a mountain, or to the corner store and back, carrying my potential through practical, wise, prayerful footsteps. In the end, I have a feeling that we're all doing well to the extent that our elders, no matter how old we are at any given time, to the extent that our elders have already walked that path and know that if they could do it, we could do it.
What about contemporarizing some of these traditions and shifting them and adapting them to the way we live in the 21st century?
Mm-hmm.
Is that tradition to you sacred, the tradition of the elders,
Mm-hmm.
or is it adaptable?
Isn't it great that the wisdom traditions, everything that they cognized thousands of years ago, are still relevant today? And that's how you know something is really a solid path. That's how you know a path is paved. Did this work ages and ages ago? Really, in the context of ages. Did it work ages ago? And does it make sense now? So Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word for life wisdom. And how brilliant that today modern science offers many of the same tools, like meditation, like getting out in nature to take care of yourself. Those are important ingredients in your self-care bag of tools. Those are really essential. So I love the intersection of the wisdom traditions and those teachers with the way modern science now has proof that those original teachings are really, really sound.
They did take the scenic route, though, didn't they?
Yes, they did. And the scenic route is also what feeds the spirit.
You have another poem there.
Yeah, I want to read this. This is the poem that you emailed me after a workshop. You emailed me after this workshop and told me to consider joining the Accents team. And I was surprised because I hadn't recognized growth in my own work in the year and a half up to that point. And I want to read it because it's important to recognize how valuable challenges a lot of artists and celebrities don't want to show the truth about the work it took to grow. Some do, but some want to have a veneer of polish. And I feel it's really important for everyone, for every audience, to recognize that struggle is an essential part of growth. Not only essential, but I don't know if growth can happen without it in a lasting way. So here's Fight Shame to Explain. Destigmatizing. Sometimes a feather of sunlight on the floor, from a fracture, the only obvious outline, soft but stark, curved like a hand loosening, shows you where to look, to notice how light is brightest from a busted opening inside a dark hole. You might notice, but to see, to catch it, something is required, something else entirely. When you can't feel from inside the murky, pressed down interior suffering, even though a warm salve is right there, the salve is not there for you.
Still think it's brilliant.
Depression needs to be destigmatized. It's really important that it's recognized not as something to be ashamed of ever. And there's a lot of it in my family. And when you're depressed, you really can't feel. I feel it helps others to know what it's like inside that dark hole. Mm-hmm. And here's what you do about it. Because while depression might be in your DNA, it might visit you even when you're doing all the right things for yourself. You're taking all the life medicine, all the prescribed medicine from your doctor, and it visits you still. There are actions we can take, sometimes with help, asking for a friend to help us do it. But the actions are really vital. It's the rest of the medicine. So here's Inside Out. That is a sectional poem. Sectional poem makes a couple of statements on the page or a couple of pages. It's basically the same idea, divided up into parts. Inside Out 1. Backwoods brisk, not yet green, but breathing me. I stretch by going at all when really what I want is the same old underwhelm under my low ceiling, tight in my envelope of bed blankets and beliefs about where I missed some mark 37 years ago, and again yesterday, of course. And the world is a bleeping mess. In the book, it has the real word. Number 2. But I owe my loved ones and my soul, especially my soul, though it's easier to be externally motivated. I owe everyone the effort anyway. 3. Out there, though the moss near dry, the creek bed forlorn in its want for water, and the sky gone gray through February's lean canopy, where birds live on so little, and pregnant deer too. Right now, I feel a mountain more, especially how murky thoughts loose and yield the vice inside.
So beautiful.
Thank you.
And I would like if you wouldn't mind, the poem about the mailbox and the mother.
Okay. This is the first time, maybe the first or second time I'm reading this publicly. Thank you for asking.
It's one of my favorite
Is
poems.
It? Oh my gosh. I took this out of the manuscript so many times. Every week I would pull this out. And my husband kept saying, no, you need to keep it in. It's really important. And Letha Kendrick, my champion writing mentor, said, nope, you need to keep it in. So, when you're feeling really vulnerable, back to this point, is the time you can't really see clearly. So when you're feeling extra vulnerable, not sure about a step to take, or you feel sure about a step but not sure it's the right one, ask the people you respect most, and they'll tell you the truth. When falling, pretend you're not falling. Remembering a 7-year-old girl. The new boy from Ghana crawls under the low red mailbox marking our bus stop. The grade 8 boys pull brown leather belts, commanding us to use something, anything, to whip him. My legs go weak. A familiar warning flares, stomach to throat. I suppress the nervous tick that will make me a target, too. I can't miss the bus. Where do I go? Across the street, the boy's mother, her eggs and milk splattered where she looked up out the mini-mart to wave goodbye to her boy. An orange kente cloth dress and matching head wrap, a sleeping baby tied to her back. She vaults toward us, flailing arms burdened English. Leave him alone! Leave him alone! The baby jostled up and down on her back. He has done nothing to you! Leave him alone! From the gutter, a broken hockey stick. The baby wakened, bawling, the mother from Ghana, charging, howling, only one sandal now, reaches our red mailbox, wielding her sword at the big boys, the oldest ones in our school. The guilty boys, still afraid of other people's mothers, scatter in every direction. It's a quiet ride to school without the grade 8 boys. Buckled, knees to stomach to throat explosion. Tick unhinged in the green vinyl seat. I pretend to stretch.
I'm able to see everything. I'm able to picture everything from the first time I've read this poem, and I've read it many times. And when you read it, now when I heard you for the first time to read it, I saw even more.
Okay. That's really good to hear, because it is so sensitive. It's so sensitive in my memory. But I have to say, writing it and reading it aloud, now having it witnessed by readers who care, by you caring, it helps bring it out of the dark in a way that heals another facet of it. And not every sensitive memory is meant to be shared publicly. I want to say that. So it's got to be a very careful editing process and discernment process.
So you said there is a poem there that about being happy to be alive.
Yes. So, the more comfortable I am in myself and who I am, and the more I love being part of whatever is happening in my life, I feel that I'm more at home in myself, and it means that I'm home everywhere. If I can be at home in myself, and I'm a portable home, walking, driving, visiting, traveling, being stationary, then home is wherever I am. And don't we all want to be comfortable and home where we are? I come home, walk my wild rocky woodland, indigo bunting families, katydids, a woodpecker, the rushing creek timber, God. In tones solstice gold, moss thick, hardwood centuries and baby saps line my edges way far out. I'm bigger here, resilient, and only a speck. Soaring thank yous with feet. I know myself. I know how to find my way home anywhere.
Beautiful. Thank you. Can you speak to the importance of flow in creative work?
This is a perfect example. Anytime I'm stuck, anytime I'm feeling bad, anytime I don't know what my next steps are, I get myself out in nature. I walk, sometimes just in my neighborhood. I've been so busy the last couple months, I haven't had time to go on an official little hike, even in the closest nature sanctuary. So I'm finding sanctuary in my neighborhood among the trees and the birds in the evening. And it always, not only do I always feel better after, but it opens in me that movement, moving my body in rhythm with nature's rhythms, whatever the season, opens the flow of my creativity. And I always have more bandwidth for everything, especially art.
Do I remember correctly that once you went to Ireland and wrote like 40, 50 poems in a weekend?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
I remember being super envious and actually very, very happy for you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was Europe. We were in Europe and surrounded by people. It was busy. There was a lot of stimulation, a lot of noise and sounds and light and food, and I could manage it by thinking about the poetry I would write related to what I was experiencing in the moment. So I was both in the moment and making art in the moment that would be manifest soon.
Speaking about stimulation, creative stimulation that is, you recently started an MFA program.
Yes, that is very intellectually stimulating. That's definitely stimulating the mind part of this recipe. I haven't written an essay in, 40 years. So learning again how to abide by these academic standards has been a challenge that I not only didn't think I would undertake at 57, but that is growing some new synapses in my brain, I think. It's a good challenge. I've had to reach out for help at times from the resources that are offered through the school, and I'm not shy about it. Why not? This is a great time in life to learn and to not be attached to what a degree means, an MFA, what it means. I'm doing it for fun, but I also want to show up in the best way possible. So different from when I was a kid, I am really here for the joy of learning and pushing myself to the very limit of what I'm capable of that way.
What is soul collage?
Soul collage is a therapeutic arts method that gives voice to parts of self that want an opportunity to speak or be understood or be seen. So we use images to make a personal deck of cards that are about 5 by 8. They're not about 5 by 8. They are 5 by 8. And on them are pictures that represent all the parts of self. And then you journal with the process and you see what the images have to tell you about yourself.
Would you say that this is shadow work in a way?
There is some shadow work involved, yes. And we follow Jung's teachings on the shadow, basically the discovery of the parts of self that haven't been understood yet, or that are grasped in a way, but that sometimes can be out of balance in a person's life. For example, a person who is angry often would have a shadow that is not yet realized enough in terms of triggers. So this would be a person's opportunity if they wanted to go there. They wanted to make a soul collage card to represent that part of self. anger, to see what it has to teach me. What does my anger have to teach me about myself? And to welcome all the parts of self. So there's no part of self that is shameful at all, ever. All the parts of self are invited to every buffet.
Tell us about the heart of leadership for women.
The Heart of Leadership for Women, Cultivating a Sacred Space is the subtitle. I rented an apartment in Florida in 2018, turning over to 2019. I was there for a couple of weeks. I had always known there was a second book in me, but I didn't know what it was. I was writing in a lot of genres. I've been taking classes at the Carnegie Center for 25 years. And I invited some girlfriends up for a weekend. We made soul collage cards, actually. And we shared them. And we created a little ceremony for ourselves on the balcony about intentions for the new year. And some of us didn't know exactly what our intentions were, except that we wanted to continue being healthy and thriving in ways that not only feed every part of self, but also ways that we have yet to discover. I thought maybe this would be an opportunity in ceremony with my friends to put in a little word about a book. I feel like there's a book coming. I don't know what the book is. Please help me understand what the book is. So we do the ceremony, and then we which consisted of writing our prayers on paper and going down to the beach, and we stood in front of the ocean, and we just said our prayers into the sea and the wind. And then we came back up to the balcony and we burned them in a little jar so that the smoke would be offered up to whatever angels were listening, whatever guides, whatever name and face of spirit each of us lived with and believed in. 2 days later, I drove them all to the airport. And when I came home, back to my little apartment for the remaining 3 weeks, the Oscars were on. I love celebrity award shows, so I'd been looking forward to it, and I thought it would be a good remedy. After they left, I wouldn't be lonely and I wouldn't miss my friends because I had this to look forward to. So I sat down with the Oscars on the television, and within 10 minutes, I was hearing in my own internal voice, the outline is not that difficult, just sit down and put a sentence to paper. So I thought, that's really cute. So I paused the Oscars, and then I went to my phone and I spoke those words into the phone. Okay, great. I'm feeling some creative spark. That's great. It makes sense. 2 days ago, we had a little ceremony and I went back to the show. And 10 minutes later, the space that you create for others needs to be endowed with the energy of the teaching you feel most strongly. I'm like, okay, pause-a-roo. And then I went back to my phone and I spoke that. And that happened through the entire show. I think it took maybe like 5 hours to watch the Oscars. And when I went to bed at 1 a.m, I was still hearing this internal voice. That was my own voice. All the important things that I had cultivated over the years now having come together after my prayer to create some kind of project. And then I said to my creative self and whatever guidance, whatever muses were helping me in that moment, it was 2:00 a.m. And I said, okay, I really need to sleep. I'm so deeply grateful this is happening. I pray that it continues when I wake up. I had a 6-hour restless sleep, woke up to the sun rising, and there it was still. It was still coming through. So I sat in front of the window and I wrote and wrote. And 3 hours later, I Googled writing coach and I found someone who could help me make sense of this outline. And within a couple of weeks, I had the entire book written. The additional magic part of this is that the remaining 3 weeks on the beach while I was writing were hours every day, from 8 a.m. in the morning until 5 p.m. when I could no longer sit at my laptop. And I was really lucky to have these 3 weeks off just to focus on it. Every day at 5 o'clock, I would go down to the beach to let go of the laptop day and just be in the rest of my life and appreciate the beauty of what was happening for these remaining weeks at the ocean. And in those 3 weeks, I found 200 heart-shaped rocks. Never before had I found a heart-shaped rock. I always wondered, where do people find these things? I see people putting them on social media. How do you go about finding something so rare and special? And then it happened every day, several times an hour. And I would see people walking over a heart-shaped rock. They didn't even see it, but it was right there, so obvious to me, and they would just pop up under our feet. And so eventually, when I was looking for a title, it couldn't not be called The Heart of Leadership for Women. After all, that was the theme. But I remember going for a walk with you one day, and we were at McConnell Springs.
Yeah.
And know that I had told you that story, and we got to the parking lot, and there, when I looked down, was a heart-shaped rock.
And you gave it to me. Yeah, I'm a proud owner of a heart-shaped rock that Lisa found. And the question on everybody's mind is, that Oscars show, who won?
I don't even remember. I don't even remember. But it was February 2019.
So it's look-upable.
Yeah, it's look-upable.
What are you working on now? What are you writing?
Right now, because I'm in the MFA, I'm writing essays, and I'm trying to write or edit 7 poems each time I have to send a packet into my mentor. So I'm just trying to fine-tune this art of poetry. The message is important, but the craft is very important. I've learned through your boot camps, and I've learned through this program. So I'm really trying to fine-tune what it means to make art on a page in a stanza.
I would love to hear a couple more poems from the book.
Well, here in the vein of healing, there can be great healing even when there's no cure. I've been facilitating a cancer support group for 10 years now. And sometimes it's preventative medicine. Sometimes it's medicine that isn't offering any kind of cure, but that is a remedy for pain. Heal without a cure. Beyond is not behind you. It's in movement through your feet, on up a mountain, or to the corner store and back. From the wing swing of your arms, direct extended ventricles, instep, outstep, in, out. Sweat it, leave it again. The pulse of you depends on a deliberate yes. And yes, before will come again. So move forward, now devoted. Physical, feet, forward, healing. Even if you can't move your body, forward is a motion toward healing.
Yes.
It's a shift in intention, and it's a way to live most of your day. Doesn't mean there's not room in the day for pity, for self-pity, or distress. All of it is valid and welcome, but it's really a choice about how much time we each want to spend in the distress that determines the quality of life. Return. In the work of mystics, I find myself in what I believe is the first time. I know you like short poems.
I do.
And if you can't get outside, if you're not physically able, if none of your friends and confidants are available, pick up something that moves you. Art, literature. You can watch wonderful cinema right in your own living room. All the healing remedies are right here for all of us. If we know what it is that feels good, that's comforting and productively supportive.
And I have one last question. That is a question that I ask all my guests who teach creative writing or whatever else they teach. What is the most important thing you teach your students? If there is one thing that you want them to remember from your workshop, what is it?
Figure out your self recipe. the ingredients of your self recipe are really specific to you. So how much sleep do you need? What type of foods are truly nourishing and which are toxic allergens in your body? What type of music moves you and helps you feel the beauty of life? What type of art? Are your relationships healthy enough? They're not all going to be perfect, but are they healthy enough? And with the people who are closest to you, can you have those important conversations? Finding a connection with something greater than self is really, really essential. All of these parts, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, have to be fed for the full recipe to be the right balance of salt and sweet.
Thanks for coming on Accents, and I'll see you at the festival.
Thank you. Can't wait.